Hey, shalom, shalom, everybody. Welcome back. Yahweh's peace to you all. Good morning. Rhonda, Micro Farmer, Lone Star Living. Shalom, shalom. Hey, Mark. Good morning. Renee, Hendricks. Good morning. Good morning. So I couldn't not do a live stream today because the news is so, well, change has come to America. That is very, very sure. Um, and I just want to start with my title, Without Rule of Law, right? This is a phrase that survivalists and preppers and conspiracy theorists like to use. And I remember when my channel was still very small, it was one of those things that other people told me, put it in the title of your video because that's going to get you views. And I thought, yeah, I don't really want to get views that way. I don't want to just catch people. So I didn't use it that much, but I probably did use it at least a little. Because in my mind, back then, which is all of, like a year ago, we weren't without rule of law. We had plenty of laws and they were working and everything was, humming along like we were all very used to. But literally now, there are places in America that are contemplating, that have already said they intend to get rid of their police departments or defund them. Now, I'm not sure what they mean by defund them. I'm assuming that means no longer give them like public money, tax money, which I think is unconstitutional, quite frankly, because provide for the common defense is part of the Constitution. And so guaranteeing your peaceful life is kind of part of the responsibility of your state, starting at your, county level, city level, and then going up to a federal level. Hey, shalom, Adnir and Cassie, good morning, and DOC. I live in Minneapolis, by the way, in the city, shout out. Okay, so DOC, what is your impression? Because I really do want today's live stream to be more than just me pontificating. I want to hear what you guys think, because I know what I think, but that doesn't necessarily mean I've got my finger on the pulse of America. Nationalize the police force, Rhonda, Micro Farmer, Wabogan Evening, Sister Kate. Wabogan, I want to know your point of view too. What is Australia saying about what is happening in America? No, I don't think you nationalize the police. That's not the intent of the police. We have a national military who, the whole point of the national military is to fight outside, is to keep outside people from coming in. The police force that we have is to handle internal stuff, and the FBI is to handle internal stuff on a national level. So we don't need to establish anything. But I want to see what DOC says. The situation, the situation here has been brewing for years. I'm not at all surprised by the current events. Many coworkers in Minneapolis, interesting time. I've only talked to a few of them about it. A whole lot of people complaining about police force, but not that many lining up at the doors of the academy to show them how it's done, Westhold Forge says. Morning, Papa Trucker. DOC, explain your thing. What do you mean it's been brewing for years? Do you think the police department in Minneapolis has been too heavy-handed for years? Or do you think that there's been civil unrest in the black community in Minneapolis for years? Because I'm a person I'm a realist, so I also can see things from both sides. And I think any situation has the possibility to go good or bad, depending on decisions made by the people influencing the situation. Simple preparedness. I think the liberals are taking over and going to force their ideas on everyone. It sure looks like a liberal agenda has been in place and is being pushed forward. What I find interesting, and I don't know if this is going to work in his favor or not, is how Trump is allowing each state to give them enough rope and they're going to hang themselves, and then the federal forces will be required to go rescue the state if utter chaos happens. because we have to look at Minneapolis is just one city in a whole, you know, whole state. Same thing with New York City and LA, because the New York City mayor and the LA mayor have both said they want to defund their police as well. Wes S., shalom, brother. Good to see you. Worried that there's going to be nationalized police. I don't think that that's going to happen under Trump. Sheriff's Department with an elected sheriff is more accountable to the communities they serve. Exactly, and that's why that's the county level policing, because see, I was on a fire department, volunteer fire department, and we, you know, did things hand in hand with city and county and state police, because we would get called to motor vehicle accidents, and so different people had different jurisdictions at different times. Plus, our fire department was mutual aid for like a city department and other places out in our county. And so the way it works is, like, your city, when they say this is our city boundary, their police force handles everything in their boundary. And anything outside of the city boundary, but within the county, is now handled by the sheriff. And the sheriff and his deputies are usually not nearly as many of them, because you have more people in a city. And they had a lot of discretion. Police do have a lot of discretion in what they decide is going to happen in any situation. They can decide right on a scene whether someone needs to be taken to jail or not. Or if they stop you for, it's a Door Creek, and if they stop you for like a speeding ticket, it's up to that police officer to decide whether he wants to ticket you. Like, were you acting like a maniac, or were you, you know, just unaware that the speed limit in that area was set at a certain number? Or if like a lot of older people are going too slow, or, you know what I mean? Like, they get to decide right there on scene. So a national police force is not the way our government is set up. Everything goes local, then outward. And like I said, the FBI is federal. They are like a national police force, but they don't get involved unless the local people ask them to come show up and want help. And certain crimes, they are allowed to get involved. Okay, so yes, the police have been a problem for a long time, some of them anyway, but the blacks have been just counting on the DNC to fix their problem as well, in spite of decades of failure. Okay. Highlight El Edwin Mayor, mob grazing out front, in the front yard. Is that your sheep? The mass Somali immigration has added significantly to the problem. In Seattle, defunding proposals take on the ideas of redirecting the law enforcement officer funding to social programs of various sorts. We are watching America tearing itself apart and wondering when it will stop. Life in Perth has returned to normal almost pre-COVID. Well, Walbogan, this would be a very interesting thing to watch from afar, because if you, and I'm not saying Australia is this, but let's say you live in a small country, this would seem like the whole country here is falling apart, and it's not. Minneapolis is one major city out of 50 states, you know, in an area huge, 2,000 miles all the way across. So the reason it's going to seem so large is because the press is making it that way. There's just so much media coverage. I've been doing some history research, and the correlation between what led to the Great Depression and political and governance changes after it are kind of scary. Well, right, Wes, and that's kind of the point I made in one of my live streams called Wise Wednesday, or Wednesday Wisdom. When there's things like pandemics and storms and natural things like locusts and the food getting scarce, it causes political unrest, which causes change. Back to church on Sunday, very excited. Okay, I'm not sure what you mean by that. You mean you get to go back to your church group on Sunday. That would be exciting. I don't think I'll ever need police ever. I can still see the need of them. Well, that's wise, Westhold Forge, because there is a reason for them. An attorney named Timothy of Japhet came out and said that the real George Floyd was one of his clients in Houston and had died 3 years ago. There's a conspiracy. Hello, Northwest Arkansas Prepper. There's a conspiracy theory that he was not killed and he never really died. I don't know. I think that's just conspiracy theorists. Okay, so what do you think? Because I find it fascinating that a police force in a place like Minneapolis defunded basically means you're not going to have a police force anymore at all. Excuse me. So I put it on Twitter. I said, well, what are you going to replace that with? Right? Because someone on Twitter said, well, no, they don't mean no police of any kind. They just want to replace the system they have with a community policing system. And I said, where has that ever worked? Give me a city and country name where there is only community policing, because pretty much worldwide every country has a police force, and I wonder why. Who's that? Hey, Gardner67, shalom. The irony, I wish someone would inform these people. Stop crime, stop funding. Start riots, police get funding for riot gear. Only immoral people need police. Moral people police themselves. John Rice. The problem with that idea, because that is a truth, moral people police themselves. And the majority of people in America are law abiding. I would not say moral in the way that I think of moral, which is biblically moral, but they keep themselves from committing crimes or being caught for committing a crime on the whole. Like probably 95% of Americans are law abiding or getting away with, because I know there are people who cheat on their taxes and do petty theft from their neighbors and things like that, but it's not a big enough deal to call in a police. The problem with the idea that a moral people will police themselves is that people are not born good, like you're being told by, idealists. The Bible says the heart of man is black, and who can fathom it? People generally are selfish and self-centered and want to control other people and want to take advantage of other people. And I think it's actually probably a very 50% of the people in America, excuse me, mind their own business. And it's about 10% who actually reach out and try to be good and help other people. Because when you run an organization, which my husband and I both have done for a long time, volunteer for the general good, you can't get people to come and volunteer. You cannot, 10%, not even 10%, about 2% of people are willing to give up their time to actually help other people. So would you say you think the people in Minneapolis are moral? Because I'm going to tell you right here, if you're willing to go out and loot and riot and damage other people's property, and also be a police officer who's willing to use his position to treat other people unfairly and unlawfully, I don't see that happening. All right, what are you guys saying? Hi, sister. Floyd's come out and supported his claim. His sister came out and supported his claim that he's not dead, or that he died 3 years ago. So who was murdered? Who was the I can't breathe? This stuff's not going to come for a while. It's been brewing for far too long, but when it's over, I think the only solution is going to be getting things back to local control, and police have to be held accountable to their community. Well, Papa Trucker, they are accountable to the community now. But, like I've said in previous videos, I think because of the war on drugs, the police were militarized, which is dangerous. Police should not be militarized. if the war on drugs is so serious, then bring in the federal law enforcement to deal with it, but do not train up your local guys to act like a military, because due process went right out the window. That's where this, I think something's wrong, and the escalation. See the if you watch some of the videos of where a police officer has shot an unarmed person, and I forget the name of the man, but he was in a car and he got stopped for like his taillight being out, and he was real panicky, and the cop panicked and he shot him, and he was unarmed and he wasn't threatening the cop in any way. The cop's training was such that he went from, talking to the guy kind of friendly to shooting him within a space of like a minute, and that is not right. Every American citizen is guaranteed by the Constitution a right to due process, that you will be read your Miranda rights, that you will be taken into custody, that you will go to jail, that you will actually be charged with something. Because a lot of people who get arrested on the scene get to jail, and then when the prosecutor looks at their case, they say we don't have enough evidence or enough reason to keep this person, and then you're released. So I think, Papa Trucker, you touched on a really important thing in that due process has gone out the window. So I do think police training needs to get back to more community-based, and so they know their population and know the problems and troubles, but build relationships so that instead of going from 0 to 100, there can be talking. I mean, there can be talking in there and then shuttling these people somewhere else. You know what I'm saying? All right, let's see what's going on. I think this is an attempt to reorganize, politicize the police force. Mark, I think that's a very interesting observation also, because politics does affect policing and always has. If you look back to stories about the Depression and even the Prohibition, the police are kind of like the military in that the police do not set their own policies. The police are simply the arm that carries out the policies. But the policies come from the lawmakers. So prohibition was made into law by lawmakers, and then policemen had to enforce the laws passed about prohibition. On the federal level, the Army does not set policy. The Army sets policy for within the Army, but the Army does not decide who they're going to fight and when. They have to be told by the president and Congress where they're going, when, and then they react. They're like the arm of the political thing. So the police have always been tied with politics because whatever laws get passed, they have to enforce. But what I think right now is being done is the media is making a bigger deal out of something when they shouldn't inflame it, but they're inflaming it. And so politicians are taking advantage of it. And they're going to pass laws that are going to be really, really something else. Okay, replace it with anarchy. Good morning, Wes. There are forces at work in Minneapolis that are trying to destabilize it. I can explain further if you want. My opinion is that the UN is ultimately behind it. I would say you're absolutely right. Rioting is a sign that there's instability, whether it's something that happens naturally, just events happening, or whether it's politically motivated. If someone who, let's say, the bricks, the stacks of bricks and the water bottles and everything, it looked like some of the rioting up there was organized. So there's some kind of political power behind it, trying to get an agenda passed through the rioting and the destabilization. And for 9 city council members to all agree they are going to defund their police, that's something. Whether they, were bribed to agree on it, or they just decided they've had enough problems with it, or they didn't like police when they were growing up. That's a lot of people to get in agreement for something that big. So, yeah, there was something a brewing in Minneapolis, and now we're seeing it come about. I lived places without police. It was peaceful. John Rice, where? In rural California, the sheriff's department have had deputies living in the community doing this, but they still bust people when they break the law. Exactly. And that's how counties work. Aid is not a law-abiding American, just saying. Well, that's right. Aid's in England, and he's already told me we need to be careful because they've lost their rights and all sorts of things. So Aid knows what it's like to live in a state where you don't have the same personal freedoms. This is going to be a very hard, expensive, bloody lesson that has to be learned. Papa Trucker. People are so brain dead that this is the only way for them to learn. I hate it, but it must be done. Well, if they insist on passing these laws, I agree with you. Give me 2 seconds, you guys. I've got to put this dog inside. She's going to sit here and bother me if I don't. I'll be right back. Suka, really? Come on. Come on. You two knuckleheads trying to bring you into the situation and all you do is mess around. What? Get in there. All right. I see this with a lot longer point of view, and I see this as a generation of people brought up by hippie parents who tell them that, government's bad and we need to do away with it and we need to have our personal freedom and all that nonsense, and their children are now the adults who are in positions of power. And so they're going to follow through on that idea that less government control and whatever is the best way to do things. I keep thinking, who stands to profit from social division? People who want instability, and I'm not sure how you would make money off that, or just a power grab. If everyone is armed, then people are less likely to start crap. An armed society is a polite society. The thugs will take each other out. Being righteous is the only way. I agree with that. No matter how the trial for the Minneapolis officer turns out, there will be more serious rioting. Be prepared. Probably true, especially if they don't find him guilty. I don't think I would like to live in a Wild West type of deal. I think the Wild West generally speaking, because we only get idealized versions of it. No one alive today was there. Probably criminals had a pretty free hand if they wanted to, but if they were caught by somebody, then the justice that was dealt out to them was swift. I must be in that 2 to 10%. John Rice, did you tell me where you lived where there was no police and it was peaceful? Shalom, David Campbell. Cities are not moral places. Well, anywhere where people is not a moral place. Morals implies some kind of guidelines. Morals implies a right and wrong. And if you do a little research and look at the commandments in the Bible, a lot of laws are based on those commandments, because without those laws, human behavior can do whatever. You get, any kind of immoral society. You have to have a set of rules in order for anything to be moral. So people watching, 15 likes. Thumbs up, folks. I agree with you. I would say most are not moral here. I would say most are trying to go with the social flow, and the social standard is quite corrupt here. Speaking from first-hand experience, right? And it's a modern thing. It's very modern for people to be immoral, to not care about anyone but themselves, and to do whatever feels good, which is also the satanic church's creed. Do whatever you want. My son is state police in neighboring state. I pray for him daily. It is tough all the way around. Best advice, stay away from the cities. Well, that's what Pastor Joe's been saying for a long time. Okay, yes, Wes, that is true. Hello, Sister Kate. Am I prepper? Hello. Protests are across the globe. Are they all in protest to police, to law and order? A lot of those protests are in support of the Black Lives Matter here. And I've also seen on Twitter, a trending topic was black supremacy. And I guess a guy, an actor, probably you guys have heard of him, named Terry Crews, that's C-R-E-W-E-S, I think, made a statement that if blacks were in control of everything, then that's black supremacy, and we have to find some kind of balance. And I agree with that. I think that's a reasonable statement to make, that if you're going to identify yourself by your culture and not by your citizenship, because my culture is, Israelite. But I also know I'm an American citizen, and because I've been outside of this country, I understand what it's like to be a citizen in other countries. And so I choose to consider my American citizenship a very important thing. But if you choose your identity by your culture, so let's say you choose to be, you're Asian and you choose to think of yourself as Asian first, I think the cultures should try to come to some sort of agreement, understanding. But what laws do is they provide a framework for making that agreement. If you sit down with the different cultures and say, okay, we're all going to be moral, and what does that mean? Well, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not commit murder, you're not going to covet your neighbor's belongings. All that stuff is a framework. If you want to throw in there, you will also call me by my gender identity title, that has to be agreed upon. That's not something you can demand people do without them agreeing that they're going to do that thing. And when you come to America and become a citizen, what you agree to is you will obey the laws of this land, and that you also have a right to vote for things you think are important. And you can start at the local level. It doesn't just have to be a national election. You can get involved in civics and politics very locally in our country. Okay. Drugs are literally pouring into the state where my son lives. It's really bad there. Okay, what I meant by held accountable is less city PD run by unelected boards and more county police that are, that are voted in. Wait a minute. Papa Trucker, I may have accidentally deleted your message. I apologize if I did. Said that their whole station got deputized, supposedly in case they get into a bad situation, but it's suspected it's for more help. Well, right, and being deputized is, you're a deputy at the county level. The sheriff can deputize any number of people to help keep law and order in his jurisdiction. Hey, the Covenant Shalom, good morning. We heard that, that was another issue I was going to bring up today, that Kentucky, the governor of Kentucky just said that all black people in his state will have medical insurance paid for by the state. And that's something I wanted to discuss later on in the live stream, because I think there's something there. I think we'll get off the police thing for just a minute and go on to that topic, because it is something I wanted to talk about. I think if taxpayers got to indicate where their tax money was going to go, that it would maybe change the way tax money was spent, because I don't agree with my tax money being spent on things like illegal immigrants, children's college. I don't want that. But if you ask me if I wanted my tax money to go for abortions or medical care for a minority in my state who could not afford their own, I would go for paying for an American citizen's health care over funding an illegal immigrant's college for their children. So I think if the governor of Kentucky wants to provide medical insurance for his citizens in his state, he should have that right, as much as he has the right to use taxpayer money to fund needles for addicts. And that's just my 2 cents worth. All right, let's go back. Smash the like button, y'all. Mark, shalom. They want to defund the police. Right, so they need people fighting amongst themselves to create the new policing plan. Hallsville, Texas for several months. Okay, well, Hallsville, Texas was not without any laws, and Hallsville, Texas was not going to stay. I mean, If the city, if the town, if it was a small town, because I'd like to know the population too. If it's a small town and they don't have a police force, it's not the same thing as Minneapolis and Los Angeles and New York City not having a police force. There are towns in states like Colorado who have 4 people. You can't have a police force that way. But even if Hawesville, the town, had no police, the county had a sheriff and deputies, and the state of Texas has state police. So it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing. A city with millions of citizens is different from a small town. All right. Public schools, university in particular, have really poisoned minds. Exactly. And that's another thing I wanted to get to in this live stream was the culture of lawlessness, the choice of lawlessness, because the majority of people in the United States are lawful. Like I said, now I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying 80% of the populace is like sainted and 20% isn't. But I am saying there are parts of our country where the culture is to be lawless. And I'm not saying it's only a certain minority group, because there are plenty of criminals of all types and colors. I would say there's probably in the prison system, Pastor Joe probably knows for sure, but I mean, there's large groups of Hispanics, there's large groups of whites, there's large groups of blacks, there's large groups of Asians. You know what I'm saying? Like, in a culture, if the culture promotes lawlessness, and now I'm talking about the music, I'm talking about the things that people are taught at their parents' table and what is taught in their neighborhoods. If your culture promotes lawlessness, then you are going to be arrested in bigger numbers. You are going to be incarcerated in bigger numbers. And I think there's a break there. I think the way to solve a problem between police and people is for the police culture to get an overhaul. Like I said, due process has gone out. There needs to be a I don't, it's hard to say that. The police need to be trained in a different way. They need to be trained to be more community oriented, as someone else on here has said. And I mean, just get to know your community and understand them, and less of the militarized training that they've had lately. Their culture needs to change. Lawlessness also needs to change. The part of our culture that is saying, don't listen to authority, you don't need to abide by what authority says, you just do whatever you want and you need to feel, that is where the change also needs to happen. Then you get to what John Rice was saying, which is a moral people. I don't think it's, I mean, you can say it moral, but I would say lawful. You will get people to follow laws if they are taught that the laws are good and that the laws are going to keep them in a peaceful, happy life. That's my opinion. Okay, am I proud? Public school, country folks, they put the dog inside to enjoy the outside in peace. Well, these dogs, you didn't see her, but she was over here like nuzzling my hand and wagging her tail, and she wasn't going to leave me alone. Liberty isn't nonsense. That's right. Shalom, Coastal 151. With all the turmoil from pandemic and now protesters, it's really hard to tell what is going on in new policies and bills passing, keeping our focus off what is really going on. I'll tell you what, there's a guy on Instagram named Daniel Crenshaw. He's a congressman from Texas, and he is really good about talking about what sort of nonsense is going on in Congress and what is important. And I suggest if you're on Instagram, you go take a look at him. Daniel Crenshaw. The Wild West had gun control. The Wild West had the laws of the country and the state in place. But as far as it being, enforced, it was not an easy thing. That's why people like Wild Bill Hickok and, oh, I can't remember their names now, the guys in Tombstone, why their stories are still being told to us today, because sometimes in an area you had one U.S. Marshal and cities and towns would go through, like we elected a sheriff, and then that sheriff would get shot, or that sheriff would leave or whatever, and there would be no laws. Uh, and so it was kind of crazy in some places in the Wild West. Shalom, Monica Child of the Most High. Your wind chimes give me peace. Peace makes me think of my grandma's porch sitting with her. Yeah, we like our wind chimes. Natural law is agreed upon by most as moral. Natural law is based on biblical law. I mean, thou shalt not murder is not a natural law. Getting angry and killing somebody seems very natural. But again, I think you and I agree, John Rice, that morality and law is very much hand in hand. You don't have one without the other. Black control isn't working out too well in South Africa, at least economically. And I don't think, I mean, see, this is how the media makes this thing explode. I don't think, I mean, I could be totally wrong. I'm an old white lady living on a mountain out in the middle of nowhere. What do I actually know? I would love to hear from some people who weren't in Minneapolis rioting. I know in America there is a general resentment for slavery in the U.S., which basically went on till 1865, and you guys are, you know, if I'm wrong, correct me, please. There's a general resentment there, and there's a general resentment that civil rights really weren't guaranteed until 1965. And that between 1965 and now, blacks in our country really kind of had to fight for what they wanted to get, and there was some bias. And really, when you look at being successful in America in the business world, it's always a fight. It doesn't matter what color you are. You have to scrabble and hustle your way to your success. I think now in 2020, it's probably much easier for anyone who wants to be successful to be successful. But I also know that in the big cities, the way public housing was arranged was by the eugenicists to be as awful as it could possibly be. And that if you had to grow up there, it would be really frustrating and really stressful and no fun. And I can't blame anybody in our country for not wanting to live there and to think that being put there is not a good thing. I can agree with that 100%. And that I think if you watch Brother Chris's live stream and how he keeps saying, come out of her, my people, come out of her, you know, don't stay in the big cities, get away from all of that. I think that is the answer, at least in our country. You don't want to be in a big city because you don't have your own independence. You can't own a way to make your own food. You can't travel freely. You know, it's you have to pay high taxes and all that other stuff. It's just really frustrating. So I know that's out there. So I can't, I think there is a reason people are really, really unhappy, and I think that there needs to be discussion about a better way. Okay. Yes, give them health care. It's so important. Taxes are theft. But, John Rice, taxes, if you're going to live in any kind of organized society, you kind of have to have taxes to pay for things like keeping the streets clean and having a fire department and things like that. So, I mean, I don't think you can get away from it. Arthur Leslie, hello. No health care for illegals or asylum seekers, no government aid for housing illegals or seekers, right? I mean, the way our country has made decisions in the last 30 years where we're funding all sorts of crazy nonsense. The Golden Fleece Award is something that's published every year that talks about where Congress puts money. And one of the things they funded was experimentation on a thicker ketchup. I mean, that's not important enough. We should be funding things that are benefiting our citizens in a real way. And it's not just poor blacks, it's poor anybody's. I mean, my next door neighbor is a person whose children go to jail all the time, in and out. That's their whole adult life. They get out, they do drugs, they do stupid things, they get arrested, and they go back to jail. And there's no way they're going to break out of that in his lifetime. He's going to die, and his two sons are going to grow up as criminals. And it starts way back at how they're brought up by the parents and the decisions the parents make. So like I said, that's a cultural change. It's population density matters. My point was that no one was policing for profit and making criminals out of a weed smoker or a leadfoot. It was nice not to be harassed. Well, that's why you go live out in the rural. But that's not going to work everywhere. What's the long game here? That's the big question. Defund the police, instigate division using the race card, encourage unrest, present the situation in the form of totalitarian control, Hegelian dialectic again. It certainly seems like it, but if Minneapolis has no police department and they try community-based policing, because that's what the person on Twitter said they were going to do. It wasn't just, we're getting rid of defunding our police department. We are going to change the way we try to keep law and order. So that's the picture you're looking at. I think it's idealistic. I think that's going to work for a short time frame. And then I think the criminals, because they are out there. There are evil people out there. And they're not just a tiny little minority. There are plenty of people who want to take advantage of other people who weren't born good looking and rich, and so, like the incels are so unhappy and they just want to rape, pillage, and burn. I think that's going to start creeping out, and I think it'll be total chaos. I do. I think there will be neighborhoods, probably, where you can keep peace and quiet because the people in there, that's what they want, but I think there will be areas where it's going to be total chaos. And that's just my prediction. I went to public school in the 70s and 80s. It was not about liberal social indoctrination, even at the majority public schools. I wasn't too, and was a minority as a white person. Now, 9,500 troops coming home from Germany by September. That's the long game, total lockdown. 9,500 troops are coming home from Germany because Angela Merkel is not friendly to them. Our troops are in foreign countries only if their government wants us there. And the reason there were any troops in Germany at all was because for a long time Russia was a threat to Europe. Russia wanted to invade Europe. And so American troops went to Germany as a way to keep them from doing that. And now that Russia is no longer a threat, the liberal government in Germany doesn't want us. So Trump's going to bring him home, and what that does when American troops leave is it leaves all the bases. There is some stuff left behind, but not a lot, and it takes all the money out of that economy. Whoop! So all the money that it was poured into the German economy to pay the rent for the soldiers and buy their groceries and their gas and their uniforms and everything else, that's going to come out of that economy, and I think that's the way Trump is trying to tell Angela Merkel, you're making a bad decision. Once the light bulb went off in my head, I started homeschooling. Well, yeah, homeschooling is the best. There is no overarching belief that everyone here holds. It's not God. It's not the Constitution. There's a major problem for any society. That's why you set up laws. That's why you set up organization and government, is because there will not be agreement amongst the people except for those laws and rules. Somebody wants their house white, somebody wants their house pink, somebody wants their house blue, somebody wants their house yellow. People are people. We don't come as a rubber stamp. But there are things that will get us to agree, and I think a peaceful life for most people is a number one priority. And I personally chose God, but also I obey the laws of my state and county and everything else. ERPs, that's it. Why ERP? You're exactly right, the ERPs. Oh, I must be way back. Oh, I am. I'm way behind. Let me catch up to y'all. 10 going on 30 now for some of them, 30 going on 10. All right. We will be very close to you in about a week. Let PGF know, and we will try to do coffee. Okay, I will let him know, Wes. So something else I wanted to talk about is the COVID situation. Um, Arizona has now declared a state of emergency in their hospital system because they opened up 4 weeks ago and now they're having a spike in cases. And this is kind of what I talked about before about COVID. Any virus has the possibility of coming back worse. And if you open up the populace before you have 0 cases, then you run the risk of exactly that thing happening. And so COVID is spiking in Arizona. And there's also information coming out that COVID was around earlier than last December. That the hospitals in Wuhan parking lots were full as early as August. So that COVID may have been around as early as August and being spread. All right. Yay, old Billy Goat. Yes, I am. Shalom. Christy B, hello. Susan Bryant, will be interesting to see if there will be spikes after all these riots. That's exactly what Pastor and I said. That's the point my mom made, and I think there will be. I think when you get thousands of people on the street, the chances that somebody had COVID is probably pretty good, and that is going to spread to everyone else around them. I can remember a time when the elders of the city actually had more power than that of the police. They ensured the community was a safe place to live. Right. Because your community, your neighborhood, the people around you, you all kind of agree on a normal. It's normal for all of us to just kind of be peaceful and our kids to go to school and we go to work and there's no drama. It's your aberration. It is your exception when somebody snaps or somebody new moves in and you don't know them and you don't know what their norms are, and it's the wolf coming among the sheep that start causing the unbalance. And that's what I'm talking about for cultural lawlessness and lawfulness. We need to address the culture that says that you need to be lawless, as well as the culture of police treating people in a military kind of way instead of in a community police kind of way. All right. Everybody has it. We are all infected. CDC guy from TWD. What's TWD? I just got the call of the wild, Scott, so I must venture into the wilderness. Love and prayers are all right. Here in Alabama, the COVID cases were less than 10K before the state reopened. Now Alabama is over 20,000 in like 3 weeks. And I think that's going to happen everywhere that opens up, unless you had 0 cases. If you have 0 cases, then you can open up, and you're probably not going to spread. New Zealand is a perfect example. New Zealand right now has 0 cases. Nobody in the hospital, I don't think, left with them, or the ones in the hospital are recovering, and no new cases for like 2 weeks. When you get to 0 with the new cases, and also 0 with like everyone's recovered, that's when the virus has burned itself out. It has run out of hosts and it will die. But that's got to be for a while. It can't be the very first day that you have 0. It's got to be like a month or 2 after that, which is why Pastor and I are definitely not coming out of quarantine till probably next spring. Our own personal quarantine, the way we do things. I'm not saying, anyway, I don't need to get into that. But to keep your safety stuff going on, to keep your gloves and your masks and keep washing your hands and all that, you need to keep that up for a while yet. Okay, so here's another item I wanted to discuss with you. I live in a very rural county that still has not had any cases. I feel like we are in our own little world here. Hopes it stays that way. You really are in your own little world there, and you're lucky to be there. That's why we're here, too. So Black Lives Matter just said they are going to form their own police to fight against the police that are in power. What do you guys think about that? Have a very blessed day. The Walking Dead. Oh, The Walking Dead. Okay. Everybody has it. We are all infected. CDC guy from The Walking Dead. I don't think we all do have it. If it were a group of militia, they'd be locked up and smeared all over the news. That's exactly right. I think that was called the Black Panthers. Here in Alabama, okay. It won't be good. Obviously, the aim is to overthrow the government. Lena K. You won't overthrow our government because we have our military, and we are the best military in the world. There's no way you're going to overthrow our government. But forming your own police to fight the police is insurrection, and that's illegal. However, there are communities in America that have their own police to police their own population. And I can give you at least 2 examples, and there's probably more. And I think there is a certain amount of possibility there because these 2 forces that I'm going to talk about are in place and you have never heard of them. And so that may actually work, but not a police force fighting the local police force, a police force to police their own community that has relations with the next police force out. So let's say Minneapolis. If the city of Minneapolis wanted to have neighborhood police departments or a different Minneapolis city police that then coordinated with the sheriff's department and the state police, that could work. If they decided, in my neighborhood, and I don't know what the neighborhood names are in Minneapolis, but let's just say there's a neighborhood called Smithtown. If Smithtown formed its own police department and appointed its own police personnel and gave them uniforms and everything else, as long as they coordinated with the Minneapolis City Police and followed the same laws that Minneapolis has, I think it could possibly work. Many gated communities have their own PDs in the country. I think that the more local it is, the better. What they're testing you for the base of COVID is, okay, wait, we'll get back to COVID in a minute there, Colleen. Testing you for SARS. SARS has been around a long time, and most of us have been exposed to it. It's true. That's true. I've heard that. BLM should be marketing their own police force as a means to protect everyone from corrupt police if they're wanting more support. Surprised they didn't pitch that approach. Well, and it's I think there's merit to that as well. It would be more like, but it can't be a totally private one. Because even if a gated community has police working there, those police have to be following the laws of the city and state and coordinating with that organization. So the 2 communities I know have their own police are the very Hasidic Jew communities in New York City. It's like their version of the Sharia law, only their police are to enforce Jewish law. And they have a uniform and they drive cars and they patrol the neighborhoods and everything. So that's one. And the second one is tribal police. The Native American nations that are within our borders have their own police departments, and they police within the tribal property. They coordinate with the county sheriff, but they have jurisdiction on their tribal property. And so if the sheriff wants to come on to tribal property, he has to get permission from the tribal police department. So it can work that way. And I think if the organizers of like Black Lives Matter think seriously about what they want, that might actually work. If they said we want to organize our communities into neighborhoods and then we want to be the police for our neighborhoods, I think there's a very because there's precedent set already, that's a way that they could get things to happen and would make them happy. I'm assuming. I don't know for a fact, but I'm assuming that could work for them. All right. What they're testing for. Okay. If Black Lives Matter. Okay, we've already talked about that. It's not a plan to overthrow the government. A faction of the governing body is orchestrating the unrest to gain more power. Exactly, Wes's. Ironically, that sort of approach for Black Lives Matter is effectively segregation, which is a giant issue, right? But, I mean, again, there are parts of our communities, parts of our nation that have been segregated, like the very conservative Jewish people and the Native Americans. They have been segregated within the borders. Rich people are segregated in the borders of America. They just do it with their money. They buy property that's really expensive that poor people can't afford so they can hang out with other rich people because they want to. I mean, we're social beings. We want to hang out with people like us, just like Israelites want to hang out with other Israelites. We have more in common with each other than with just your general populace. So I hadn't even thought about rich people in that context. Sure. I mean, and, you know, just all kind of middle class people and Hispanics and just, I don't think that's an unnatural thing. The only solution here is to let people do what they want and let them see how wrong they are about their worldview, like how you deal with a teenager with bad ideas. That is a solution up there, and I think it's probably going to go through because Donald Trump is the kind of president who's willing to let people hang. Give them enough rope, they hang themselves. I think he's willing to let Minneapolis devolve into just a horrible mess, and he's going to blame the mayor and the governor, and then if it goes beyond his line in the sand, I'm swatting flies out here, you guys. If it goes beyond what he's willing to let happen, then he would send in the National Guard to establish law and order, and then they'd have to rebuild their city starting from scratch, which they might need to do. And it's a painful process. There's going to be a lot of pain involved in that. And so if you live in Minneapolis and you don't want to be involved in all of it, I suggest you leave. Hi, Sister Kate. You are braver than me. I can't make myself discuss this publicly. It's just my opinion, Wes. I'm not, you know, I'm just airing my opinion. I have no power to do anything as far as changing the reality. And I also, people can disagree with me. I'm just giving you my point of view. All right, so we talked about that, and that. LA's talking about defunding their police department, and so is New York City. I think the same thing's going to happen. LA, it probably won't go bad right away because you have enough people there who, you know, are groovy and hip and whatever. But the criminal element that's going to be a risk in LA would probably be drug runners and people like that. And I can see the northern part of the state wanting to say, nope, that's your mess. You keep it all down there. We're going to be law-abiding up here. Okay, well, I've discussed all the things I had written on my piece of paper, so if you guys have any burning questions or topics, you guys, now's your chance. The cartel could step in and get a foothold with LA. That's what I'm thinking, and that would definitely need federal intervention to take care of, because the cartel has so much money. I would really loud and start yelling. I would get really loud and start yelling at know-it-alls. Well, Wes, you gotta control your temper. How on earth do you sell your house there now if you do want to leave? Yikes. Well, that's right, Ann. You're probably not going to get much for it. You could either rent it, which I think wouldn't help you, or just board it up and pray it doesn't get burned down. And also, insurance companies are probably going to say, if your house is in Minneapolis, we're not going to guarantee it anymore. So you're taking a real risk there. But the thing is, Come Out of Her, My People has been around for a while. So you should have left earlier. Got to get back to work. Sister K, you're awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Sister Ro, for dropping in. Shalom. Any other comments, questions? I'm in the process of moving one city over from Minneapolis. Long term, I'm trying to get back to the country. I'm from rural Iowa. You're going in the right direction, DOC. I looked up BLM platform last night online, and they're very clear about their goals. They mentioned supporting the transgender brothers and sisters, breaking the family structure, etc., etc. Keep in mind, they're only a small part of our population. They're getting a lot of press. They're getting a lot of media attention and political clout. But they cannot enforce their beliefs on anybody. They can protest, they can do whatever they're doing, and it's up to the local authorities to take care of that. Congress would have to pass a law for the whole country to do anything that BLM has on their platform. And I don't think Congress is going to get that. All right. I have to say thank you. And a few others that said, come out for my people, safely tucked away in the Ozarks now, back home. Yeah. The most socialist cities in the country are being burned to the ground by socialists, Wes is saying. I mean, look at LA and their homeless population. That's just a mess, too. Prayers to you. I have friends who live there, too. It's about destroying families, which makes no sense. See, if anything, the black community, and again, right, I'm just an old white lady sitting on a mountain, so what do I know? From an outsider's point of view, looking in, we just had a black president for 8 years, and online, someone said, you know, I wish Obama was president again, and then somebody else tweeted, tell me one thing that he did to help black people. And I replied to that, and I said, he set an example, he and his wife, of a married couple with children who worked hard and attained the top office in the country. That is an example to set for the community, that this is achievable, that this is something people can aspire to, because for the longest time in the community, families were torn apart. Churchgoers would keep the family together. The local culture was, you know, have 27 baby mamas and treat the women like hoes. But they set an example there. And if Black Lives Matter is going to say break down the family structure, that is not, that's a communist, socialist thing. That is not a black thing. Look at Jay-Z and Beyonce. They're some of the most famous black people in the country and in the world, and they are a married couple with children who work really hard. And they set an example. So if Black Lives Matter is doing that, it's not for the black community only. That's a socialist, communist point of view. And it's to be avoided. It's a great morning when you go from PJF to Bear to Sister K videos all in a row. Oh, thank you for saying that. That's really sweet. I love that, man. Okay. Follow Reverend T. Christopher on Twitter. He's a Black Baptist Reverend in Minneapolis who does real outreach here. Very good man. He's advocating for blacks here in the right way. See? DOC, thank you for saying that. Because Black Lives Matter is not the only voice for black Americans. There are other people who speak for them as well, like Terry Crews, like this reverend. It's really good to know socialist and communist beliefs so that you can spy them in other people and what they say. Just like the satanic ones. Do whatever you want. That's satanic. There's a guy with a white beard out in my front yard making interesting gestures. He introduced more African Americans to golf. Well, so did Tiger Woods. Shalom, everyone, from Haunted 55. All right, well, what do you guys want to talk about? I've been talking for an hour. If you have no more questions or any topics you want to talk about, I have things I need to do on the homestead. Oh, come on. Not even one question. Oregon Berry? Anything? We've discussed COVID, community policing, Lawfulness versus unlawfulness. The asymmetrical warfare has been going on for decades. Sadly, it worked. Shaking my head. In a political arena, in some of the larger cities, yeah. Excuse me. But I don't know that it's worked nationally. It's just, it seems nationally because of the press. Just a couple more weeks. Can't wait to move out to our farm permanently. Just a couple of more weeks. Lone Star Living, that's really good news. I hope you get there soon. Y'all ever kept sheep? Thinking about getting sheep, don't want goats. Okay, Lone Star Living. No. I have never had sheep. And I don't have a lot of experience. I can give you my impressions. The Covenant, it's a channel that a brother of ours who lives in Kentucky has had sheep now for, almost as long as we've had goats. So his channel may be a better source of information for sheep. My understanding is that sheep are just, basically you're fighting every day to keep your sheep alive. Now, I can't tell you exactly what that means. I know this much, that a brother who's keeping sheep right now, apparently there was not enough vitamin E in what these sheep were eating, and one of them died because it didn't get enough vitamin E. I also know you're not allowed to give them copper or any medicine with copper because they have a low tolerance for copper. They tend to flee in the face of adversity, and like a couple of dogs can kill your whole flock in like a night because they're just going to keep running around and they don't try to defend themselves. I've also heard, but I don't know if it's fact, that once a sheep like gets in mud, it'll stop struggling and just stay there and die. So that's the bad things I've heard about keeping sheep. The good thing about sheep is it's a clean meat. Around Passover, people are going to want to buy your lambs, and it gets in an auction generally 4 times what a goat does. So as a financial thing, I think sheep's pretty good, and you can get sheep that grow wool, and you shear them, and then you can do things with the wool, or you can get what are called meat sheep that won't need to be sheared. They will drop their wool off when it gets hot, and are specifically for butchering and eating. So that's all the sheep information I have, brother. I wish I knew more. Hey, I was reaching. Don't like the guy. Shalom, Renee. How is your garden doing? Are you going to have a good yield? Our garden is doing pretty good, but as I said in earlier videos, the bugs have now come out, and so they are starting to attack my greens. So what I'm doing, yesterday, I cut all the healthy leaves that were left on my kale plants, and some very healthy turnip greens, and I've put them to be dehydrated, and from now on, that's what I'm going to continue to do. But I can see the damage, like the cabbage leaves all have holes in it, and the Brussels sprouts plants all have holes in the leaves. I will probably use the pesticide on only the Brussels sprouts because they're not ready yet, and so we're not going to be eating them probably for another month. But the other stuff, I go out and by hand, I pick things off of it, but eventually the bugs are going to win. So I've already got enough dried greens to last for a couple of years, so that's a good deal. We got a bunch of peas out, and we're eating them fresh. My tomato plants are growing. I still haven't seen any cucumbers that I planted in there come up, but Pastor has some. And we still don't have any peppers in the ground, so he and I have to get peppers planted soon because we're behind the curve now. And I'm also planting corn in my chicken run. I finally got that cleared out yesterday, and I have a row of corn in there, and I plan on getting 3 more rows. So it's doing pretty well. Thank you for asking. Please tell Pastor my veggie garden is having the best crop in years. It's time for bed now. All the best, Sister Kate. Well, Bogan, thanks for stopping by. And I'm glad your garden's doing well. Setting a Luciferian example, no one that follows Christ should promote those two. Well, it's true, Lefty Gatekeeper. I don't promote them as a spiritual leadership. I was simply stating they are a married, successful minority couple. And they are. But you're right about their spirituality. Okay, how do you get rid of gophers? Get some dogs that'll eat them, or cats. Um, Target practice. Bless you. Thank you for everything you guys do. I appreciate it greatly. PGF's Man Up video changed my life a few years ago. Good, DOC. I'm glad to hear it. How do you think we should counter all of this? New World Saxon. How do you think we should counter it all? Well, you have to realize that at your level, unless you live in Minneapolis, you're probably not going to be able to directly affect what's happening up there. But kind of keep control and track of what's happening in your local area. And if something untoward starts happening, get involved. Like, get involved in your local politics and vote. Vote. Where did you get your sawhorses from, Colleen? I think Lowe's. I think someone may have given us a set too. Also, countering this, you want to stay quarantined. You want to grow your own food. You want to be as self-sufficient as you possibly can be, because you may need to be. Depending on how bad everything gets, you may have to support yourself. So be as self-sufficient as you can, keep quarantined, and be politically active in your local area. Pastor liked to point out a Coeur d'Alene, I think it was Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. Is that right? Coeur d'Alene, Idaho? I think it's Idaho. It's either Idaho or Iowa. They heard Antifa was going to come up there to protest, and so the local populace, over 100 people, went to the main street in town, every single one of them carrying a rifle, and they were waiting around for Antifa to show up, and Antifa never showed up. So that's another way of controlling the situation locally. Movements take work, whether righteous or evil, it takes work. I believe a lot of younger generation don't want to endure the long haul. TV, smartphone are the reality. Push and delete. Off-topic info about Anatolians. Okay, you're right. Jay, Ontario, a lot of them don't want to get involved, and so by being passive, they're allowing things to happen that they could probably stop if they were very well organized. Anatolians, go ahead, ask a question. Are you growing melons this year? I think Pastor has planted watermelon. I'm not much of a melon eater, so I haven't planted much. In hell, the smoke rising from the torment forms little demon rats that dig in your garden and eat your plants. They are called gophers. Another option would be to do raised beds. Get your plants up off the ground so the gophers can't have contact. And I've seen people do raised beds like you did in your one video, but I'm talking about actually a structure separated from the ground with a bottom on it so they can't, right? You put some kind of wire bottom or a metal bottom, so it's an actual, like, raised in the air bucket. Okay. Goats are tough gangsters. Goats are very tough. Now, goats and sheep have a thing in common, which is worm infestations, gut worms. And so you do need to watch your animals. There are organic ways to deworm them. I use commercial wormer. I use horse wormer, because it's the same medicine that's in a goat wormer, and horse wormer is for much larger, like a horse is 1,200 pounds, so you get that much wormer, and I just scale it down for the weight of the goats. But goats can eat anything. I think sheep like grass, but they can forage a bit too. But they have horns, and they generally do try to protect themselves. They are going to run away from danger, but I just chose goats because I think they're hardier. All right. Sheep die mostly of parasites. You can pour ammonia down their holes. There's another suggestion. Hair sheep, Google, painted desert dormers, better hardiness. There you go. Dorpers, okay? Meat sheep. Love the vids, Barry Honeycutt. Making watermelon wine this year. I don't know if he is or not. He's going to try to grow them. Okay. Not many bugs in it. It's also no rain for 8 days. I'm using row covers for my brassicas to keep the cabbages from being eaten. Somebody just sent me a bag that is, I think is supposed to be for a blossom, maybe catching the flower blossoms. But like with the grapes, and I put the pantyhose over them and tie it, I think that would probably work on a brassica if you could somehow get something like a pantyhose stretched over top of it and just tie it at the bottom. It would be able to, the flying bugs wouldn't be able to get in there and get at them. Yes, Idaho, thank you. She took out 2 rats yesterday. Good for Mrs. West S. Okay. She lives outside in this house broken. She doesn't have a box. When you have a garden dog, you need bees? I don't understand that question, am I, Prepper? See American Kangal Club for info about Anatolians, Boz dogs, and Kangals. Not do the same job. Some are dangerous. I use Tool, really cheap fix. That's a good suggestion, Chrissy Boo, Tool. Yeah, Anatolians are very unpredictable. You have to look at the breed line, because the line that we got our Anatolians from were very aggressive, and they wound up biting people and had to be put down. They're very strong-minded dogs, and if you're not a strong-minded dog owner, that dog may dominate you. I think Pyrenees, Great Pyrenees, which is very similar, have a gentler disposition and a better track record for just watching animals and not being a big problem. But any dog you get, you have to train. You can't just buy a dog and expect that dog to be perfect when you get it. So I would only suggest Anatolians if you have some way that's totally secure to keep them under control, which would be like an outdoor run that's covered so they couldn't escape from it, and a barn to keep them in at night, or your house. Because when they get out, they roam 5 miles around, and you don't know what they're doing out there. Shalom, Wes. Sorry, I have to go. All right, Mark. Shalom. All right. Be setting traps, not talking on YouTube. Don't tell my wife. Shalom, y'all. I'm going gopher killing. Good luck, Wes. Groundhogs same as gophers. No, groundhogs are much bigger. Finally catching a live stream. This month marks 3 years on our homestead. Grateful for finding you and PJ so many years ago and making the move. Yay, Mama Vinova. I'm so glad. Do you need bees? You should have bees in my prepper. It depends on where you live. But bees are what are going to pollinate your flowers and your plants and your orchard and everything. Now, Pastor and I live in the midst of a very large space, and he's not keeping any bees this year. And so I was really worried about, because, bee populations are declining around the world and this and that. And then I did that, I think it was a Instagram post with the blackberry bushes that were out here flowering, and they were covered in bees. So obviously we have a healthy bee population near me. But if you aren't sure, and you want to know for sure that your plants are going to get, not fertilized, but what am I trying to say? Pollinized, get some bees. And honey's awesome. If you don't have any other alternative sweetener, honey is awesome. It tastes great. Fresh honey is amazing. Same happened to me. My new Anatolian attacked other livestock guardian dogs. Right. My garden is starting to come up. Yay! Shalom. Oh, that's awesome. My vet told me that chewing tobacco was a natural warmer. I contacted him about one of my horses that loved to steal the farmer's tobacco and eat it while he was being shot. Yeah, I've heard that too, and my son actually bought some tobacco, and then we never used it. So I don't know how efficient it is. I know some people use diatomaceous earth in the feed for goats to keep worm populations down. I had a neighbor who did that, and her goats still had worms. And I used permethrin, which is a pesticide, on my pasture in the spring to kill the larva, and my goats did not have any worms that summer. But right now I use wormer. I've also heard shredded carrots are good natural wormer, and vinegar in the water. But I don't know the amount. I don't know how much vinegar you give them to keep the worms down. Rotating your animals too. If you rotate them, I said 2 weeks, but someone told me recently every 10 days from one pasture to the next, then the larvae have no chance to reinfect the animal. But if you keep them in the same pasture forever, you are going to have worm infestation. Hey, Norman, good day, shalom. Okay. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed with everything that is going on in the world. I lay my worries at Elohim's feet and ask for his help and guidance. I pray that we, the set apart, make it through. There's always a remnant. There's always a remnant, David. The biggest challenge to a believer is that you keep your faith through all the troubles, because the Bible's very clear that the person who runs the race to the end is the one who gets the reward. So you cannot lose your faith because of the troubles. Yeah, keep in mind that we're all under stress because of what is happening. One thing would be turn the news off, but I know, it's also good to be informed about events happening. But do the things that help you relax. Take a day off. You know what I mean? Take hot baths or long walks or whatever, because there is stress. There's stress in what we're faced with. There's stress in being under a pandemic, with an election coming up. There's stress when the weather gets hotter. So, do the things that help you relax. Stacy at Sustainable Sewers feeds tobacco to her stock in their feed. Well, there you go. And she's a very good farmer. She knows a lot about farming, so if she does it, then I would think that was something that would work. And I'm going to have to look into that. I mean, even growing a little bit of tobacco for that reason might not be a bad idea. All right, y'all. I've been talking an hour and 23 minutes and 34 seconds, and I am finished. I'm going to get back to my day. I have stuff to do today. Thanks for dropping in. Bot wormer. See? Good suggestions. Okay, you guys. I'm getting off. Shalom. Good to see everybody. Blessings. Please comment on videos too. Don't be shy. All right. Shalom, shalom.